a lightweight, high-speed Longines, a steel watch in silver and a gold watch in steel, and Omega puts the moon on your wrist. It's episode 97 of A Week in Watches, a bi-weekly look back at new releases and interesting stories from the watch industry. I'm Zach Weiss. Let's get this started. Well, it's officially 2025, so Happy New Year and all that. The beginning of the year is typically a bit quiet as the big groups gear up for their respective displays, LVMH and Swatch later in January, and then, of course, Watches and Wonders in the beginning of April. That said, there has already been a steady trickle of releases to whet our horological palates. This episode of A Week in Watches was brought to you by the Wind-Up Watch Shop. New to the shop is the G-Shock DW5000R 1A Origin, a revamp of the very first G-Shock. Some cool Casio X Pac-Man pieces, including a nerd-tastic calculator watch in yellow, the futuristic Prevail field watches, and more. Head to windupwatchshop.com to check them out for yourself. Longines surprised and delighted back in 2022 when they announced the resurrection of the Ultra-Cron, a line of watches dating back to the late 1960s. They were powered by 36,000 beats per hour high-frequency movements and guaranteed to an accuracy of a minute per month, or 2 seconds a day, which surpasses chronometer standard and frankly is still exceptional by today's standards. For the revival, they created a new version of the first Ultra-Cron, a barrel-cased diver that holds the title of the first high-beat dive watch, and more importantly, introduced a new 36,000 BPH caliber to put in it, the L836. High-beat movements are few and far between, with the majority being made by Zenith and Grand Seiko. So this was a really big deal for a Swatch Group brand, especially since it was priced at about $3,300 on a strap, making it the most affordable high beat as well. Additionally, they created a new Ultra-Cron standard for these watches, echoing the beyond chronometer standards of the original, sort of like Metas, but with, well, frankly, a totally different credential set. These movements are put through a battery of tests by an independent party in addition to receiving chronometer certification. Sadly, they aren't guaranteed to 2 seconds per day, however. But to get to the point, a little over 2 years later, we finally have a new Ultra-Cron, though it's really just a riff on the diver from 2022. Called the Ultra-Cron Carbon, Longines took the 43 by 49 by 13.9 millimeter case from the diver and made it out of forged carbon and titanium, giving the watch a dark, techy, and lightweight makeover. Thanks to the materials, the weight has been reduced from 108 to 68 grams, which is substantial, helping to mitigate its fairly large overall size. Though mostly a material change, the bezel design is very different, and the dial has had a few modifications as well. In an odd decision, they turned the unidirectional dive bezel into a fixed bezel with a stripped-down 60-unit index featuring numerals and dashes alternating at intervals of 5. Given that a rotating bezel is a pretty standard feature on a diver, I'd go so far as to say the Ultra-Cron Carbon no longer counts as one, though it still has a 30-bar water resistance. But rather now it's a general sports watch, perhaps even one with more of a motorsport bent to it. That said, I happen to think the new insert looks sharp and frankly suits the watch well. The dial retained its general layout but received additional sub-seconds marks and the removal of automatic below the Longines logo, which was a smart move as the dial is just a bit more balanced now. Sticking with the dark theme, any color has been removed and the hands and dial furniture have a gunmetal finish. There's one more change, and that's to the price, which is now $4,900 on a sailcloth strap, putting it $1,300 over the previous steel version on a bracelet. That's a steep and tough to justify as a consumer increase. My thoughts on the potential reasoning for this are as follows. First, perhaps they simply were undercharging for the steel version, with increased costs coming from manufacturing and testing the new movement. Who knows? Second, there's some smoke and mirrors around forged carbon, which brands utilize to increase prices. But considering Tissot, another Swatch Group brand, makes the PRX carbon at only a couple hundred more than the steel version, makes me doubt it really added too much to the cost of the watch. No matter how you look at it, it makes the steel version seem like even a better value. I did get to see the carbon in person, and it's a very attractive watch. A bit large for my taste, but not absurdly so. That said, what I'd really want to see from the Ultra-Cron line are dressier and more classic designs. Having a sub 5K line of high beats just has huge potential. You just have to use it. Fears fancifies once again. Last year at the British Watchmakers' Day, Fears had available what they called the Brunswick 38 1924 edition, created to celebrate both the event and the 100th anniversary of the brand's first sterling silver watch. The 1924 edition paired a polished white lacquer dial with exquisite typography and a 925 silver case with a single diamond set in the end of the crown, which is Fears' way of indicating a precious metal case. Limited to just 10 pieces, it was definitely one of my favorites from the show. Well, for this year, they've created a suiting follow-up to that watch, the Brunswick 40.5 Jump Hour Edwardian edition. Named for the Edwardian period, which lasted from 1901 to around 1919, the Jump Hour retains the aesthetic of the 1924, but reformats it for the complication. The dial is polished white lacquer with black lines and numerals, using the same historically inspired typeface. The case is 925 silver with a diamond set crown as well, but at the larger 40.5mm size. The dial has been changed somewhat from the mainline jump hours. It's now completely flat and has no applied rings, giving it more of a vintage porcelain dial appearance. Most significantly, however, the typeface of the large hour digit is now also in the historic typeface, which simply looks fantastic. Limited to 10 pieces once again, the Brunswick 40.5 Jump Hour Edwardian edition will only be available in person at the British Watchmakers' Day in London on March 8th, and will be priced at £5,450 or around $6,600. Vacheron steals the show. The Vacheron Constantin 222 was the ancient brand's mid-century response to the emergence of the Genta-designed integrated bracelet sports watch. Designed by Jörg Heisek, not Genta, and launched to celebrate the brand's 222nd anniversary, the 222 definitely had a similar vibe, though a flavor of its own. Notably from the bottle cap bezel, diamond-shaped center links, and on-case Maltese cross logo placement. Produced until the mid-80s, it's said that less than 1,000 examples were made, making it less successful than the Gentas, but all the more rare today. In 2022, VC fans rejoiced as the Maison relaunched the 222 as part of their Historiques line. Made fully of gold, including the dial, the new 222 retained similar proportions as the original, making it a recreation rather than an interpretation. Available only through boutiques and highly limited in production, the $74,000 watch wasn't meant to make the 222 a mass appeal luxury watch, but rather served to celebrate the brand's history and give a nod to their enthusiasts. Well, to celebrate the brand's impressive 270th anniversary, a little under 3 years later, they've once again launched the 222, but this time in steel, featuring the same 37mm case that's a hair under 8mm thick, dial layout, bracelet construction, and movement. It's all but identical to the gold model, just made out of durable and more affordable, which is relative when talking about VC, stainless steel. Obviously, this has a big overall effect on the look of the watch, as the white metal, which is mostly brushed across the case and bracelet, gives the 222 a more rugged and even industrial look that is befitting of its intentions as a luxury sports watch. While the gold model was more or less a recreation of one of the original varieties of the 222, this new steel model features a matte blue dial, which, unless I'm mistaken, was not an option on the originals, so a very slight update to give it modern relevance. With steel comes a decrease in price to a very reasonable, I'm being sarcastic, $32,000, which is obviously a lot. But if you're expecting something different from VC, well, that's just not how these things work. Now, while the price is more accessible than the gold, the watch itself likely will not be, as these two will be available only through boutiques and will be made in limited quantities. A new year, a new Speedy. On the last A Week in Watches episode of 2024, as you might recall, I spent a decent amount of time discussing the Speedmaster Pilot, a late in the year and fairly surprising launch from Omega. Well, if you thought you'd be speedy-free for a bit, I'm afraid you and I were wrong, because here we are, and there's a new Speedmaster Moon phase. Well, actually two, both sporting new cases, a new movement, and quite a lot of meteorite. While not perhaps the most popular subline of Speedies amongst enthusiasts, Speedies with moon phases date back to the 80s, though their modern incarnation is a far cry from the aptly named Speedy Moons. Sporting 44.25 by 50mm cases in steel, ceramic, and gold, with automatic movements resulting in nearly 17mm of height, the recent models were clearly a luxury and showy take on the iconic sports watch. Well, following in the steps of the successfully refactored 3861 Speedy Pros and last year's first Omega in Space Speedmaster, Omega has given the speedy moon phase a bit of a makeover, reducing the size, though keeping the luxe trappings. Now with a 43mm diameter and a 48.6mm lug-to-lug, which is new for a speedy. Perhaps more significantly, however, is a reduction in height to 13.6mm, thanks to the new manually wound coaxial master chronometer caliber 9914. Overall, the new case is closer in scale to the Speedy Pro, a touch larger in each dimension, including a 21mm lug width, but far less clunky than the previous Speedy Moons. What remains is the general dial layout, however. The subdial at 3 features stacked hour and minute counters, at 9 are stacked active seconds and pointer date, and at 6 is a large moon phase. New for this version, the moon phase features apertures on top and bottom to account for how the moon appears in the northern and southern hemispheres. This is a first for Speedy, though not new in general, as brands like IWC have had similar displays for a long time. I imagine our friends on the other side of the equator will be thankful for this, though I have a question for you all. Do brands ever make moon phase watches where it turns the opposite direction? Or do you just have to accept that what's on the watch is reversed? I'm curious. Both versions of the new Speedmaster moon phase feature meteorite dial surfaces, one in galvanic gray, the other in PVD black, as well as moons made of lunar meteorites, which is to say pieces of moon rock that have fallen to Earth, which is admittedly kind of cool. The gray version features 18-karat white gold markers and hands that have been PVD'd blue, which feels like a weird thing to do to gold, as well as a blue ceramic bezel. The black version has gold markers and hands too, without coating, and a black ceramic bezel. Lastly, the bracelets have been updated, now appearing similar to the one on the new gen of Speedy Pros, which were vastly improved over the previous generation. Actually, I take that back. There is still one more thing, and that's the price. The Speedmaster moon phase meteorites come in at $17,100. Yeah, 17. For comparison, the previous version in steel on a bracelet was $11,500, though it lacks gold accoutrement and the meteorite surface and moon. Oh, and hilariously, the new model is 50 meters, while the old was 100. Price aside, these seem like a good new direction for the Speedmaster moon phase watches given the new case size and manual movement. But I don't know why, at this point, they don't just bring out a new version of the very cool Speedy Moon from the 80s. It had the Speedy Pro case, a movement based on the 861, and an awesome 4 subdial layout with a stacked moon phase and pointer date at 12. Considering Omega now has the 3861 coaxial master chronometer, I would think they have the perfect base for it. I don't know, you tell me what you think. And that's a wrap for episode 97. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you'd be so kind, and I'll see you next time.